I hope it's not. Oh, no, it's not. Sorry.
Give me one second.
Sure. Thanks. So if I want to look at Andrea, if I look there, I have to go that way, but she's not too that way.
Okay, thank you, Ryan.
I call the mirror.
Really?
I call the meeting of the Falmouth Public Schools to order for September 28th, 2021. Per Governor Baker's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, the public will not be allowed to physically access this school committee meeting, but it can be viewed live on channel 14, and a recording of this meeting can be viewed on YouTube. Let's pledge for the stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded. If any member of the public would like to make an audio or video recording of this meeting, please notify me by raising your hand, and it's the hand icon within Zoom, and I will notify the public per the Massachusetts public meeting laws. Do we have anyone who is making a recording today? Hi, Mackenzie, thank you. Very good. Mission and vision, Melissa.
Falmouth Public Schools mission. The Falmouth Public Schools creates world-class student learning experiences. Our Clippers are empowered to pursue their goals with curiosity, integrity, and resiliency. Falmouth Public Schools vision. Clippers are creative, inquisitive, and engaged learners who participate in their community as socially responsible citizens. Clippers effectively communicate and solve problems that impact the world around them.
Thank you, Melissa.
Certainly.
Public comment. Members of the public are welcome to speak about items that are not on the agenda. Comments should be limited to 2 minutes in length. Due to the open meeting law, there will be no debate or action taken on public comment items. For items on the agenda, the chair may accept comments from the public following the committee's discussion of an item. Additional comments and feedback can also be submitted by email to schoolcommittee@falmouth.k12.ma.us. Do we have any public comment this evening? Great, okay, seeing none, we're going to move on. Okay, first item on the agenda, review of the role of the school resource officer. So just some background information. We met Officer Brandt, the new school resource officer, in July, and we thought it'd be a wonderful time to take the opportunity to expand our conversation on his role in the district and some of the initiatives related to restorative justice. So, Dr. Dorr.
Thank you for the introduction. So I thought if we're going to talk about the role of the school resource officer, it would be helpful if we also heard from the administration at both the Falmouth High School and Lawrence. So tonight I have with us, I have Mr. St. Julian, I have Mr. Bushy, and of course we have Officer Tim Brandt is with us. We're promoting them. I'm just looking to see if they're all, there's, okay, yeah. And we may or may not have the chief join us, but we'll, Brian, if you would look for that, appreciate it. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Henry.
Hello, hi, I'm my name is Henry St. Julian, assistant principal at Falmouth High School. I feel like I'm in a dark room, so I apologize for the lighting and sometimes the flickering, so I'll just leave it like that. Officer Bryant's been been a positive addition to our school system. We see him walking around the school, especially in lunchtime, and getting to know the kids. I feel like that's a very important aspect, is that he is building relationships with students, with our staff, and that's what he's doing. He's very helpful with us, sometimes with paperwork, like anytime we have a 51A, he's ready there to help us in filing. He's a very calm and a great, easy presence in our school. And so I've been liking that about him. He is, as the assistant principal, we're all about restorative justice, and he's on right that. We've had private conversations on how we want to deal with any kind of situation, and definitely restorative justice has been at the forefront of our conversations. So I've been very glad about that. He's just another friendly face. He's going to be there at the homecoming dance and football game. So he is there for the kids. I do know that he's an instructor. So last time we had Alice training, right, Officer Hurt was there, Sergeant Hurt was there, but Officer Bryant was there as well. And so he is a resource on understanding the Alice training procedure. So that's a very important component. Just this morning, he came into my office and just being proactive, how we're going to do. Is there a way that you want me to help with this situation that I was dealing with? And so he comes to my office and we start talking about that. So I believe he's proactive, collaborating with me and with the other assistant principal, and just building positive relationships. So so far it's been very good, and I've been very pleased by that, by the transition. So that's what I have. Any questions?
Any questions from the school committee?
Mr. Bushy?
Yeah, Henry really described Officer Brandt's start with the school district well. I believe he's realistically been spending more time at the high school than at Lawrence, but at Lawrence, he's primarily visited during our lunch waves and is really easygoing, spends time with the kids in the cafeteria and in front of the gymnasium for mask and movement breaks. He's interactive with the students in an appropriate way, in as much as he will stop and chat with any one of them that wants to ask him a question about his profession, or he will just be there to say hello and greet students as they come and go from the building. He started off just right away with an eagerness to, like Henry said, build positive relationships with kids. Last year, he attended our Juneteenth celebration, and I was expecting him to come and just be around supervising, but he got right in there and was doing arts and crafts projects with the students at the tables. And then we attended a field trip together, an end-of-year field trip together at Trotting Park Road, and it was a really hot day in June, and we actually got talked into playing a soccer match with the kids, which I was really impressed with his ability to get up and down the field with all the gear on in the hot June sun. And then he picked up right at the start of the year with the same kind of practice. Today, the team one was on a public art scavenger hunt on Main Street in the areas in town, and he took the cruiser down to Main Street to stop and talk to kids and be available for conversations and possibly help them find some art pieces that they were looking for. So like Henry said, we've been really pleased. It's been really easy and great to work with him. He's been a great addition, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well, like Henry said.
Thank you. Any questions for Principal Bushy? Andrea?
We need to do general questions.
We are going to do general questions.
Okay, then
Okay.
Thank you.
Chief Dunn, would you like to go next, or Officer Brandt?
I don't know if it's
Let Tim talk. Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, so I've had a great start to the school year. I'm sure you guys are all aware, but we follow an SRO triad, and those three are informal counselor first, educator, and lastly, a law enforcement officer. My main goal and job at the schools is to be a liaison between school staff and community resources. Like Mr. St. Julian said, connecting the school with DCF. Children's Cove does forensic interviews for sexual assaults. So I kind of connect the dots there. And lastly, Bay Cove mental health, getting the students some mental health support that they need. I'm also a resource for students who may need help at home with their family, whether it's getting section 35s for a parent, I can always steer them in the right direction. I assist the school with conflict mediation. So just kind of having the students kind of calm down and go their separate ways and keep it civil between them. And just building positive relationships with students, being someone they can trust, being another caring adult and a friendly face that they can come to for anything, and kind of give them a resolution that they need.
Wonderful, thank you for that. And would you like to hear from the chief before we open up for general questions?
Yes. Hey, thank you very much. As you know, we've been partnered with the Falmouth school system for many, many years with different SROs over those years. Unfortunately, those SROs always seem to get promoted to a higher rank, so we have to find you new ones. When we did the interview process, Tim really shined, and we thought he would be a great fit for the school moving forward this year. And it's all about building relationships with the staff, but particularly building relationship with the students. And that goes a long way to help us within our community as a whole. And in years past, we've had 2 SROs, one for the high school and one for the Lawrence School. Excuse me. But due to staffing, I'm unable to provide 2. So Tim's doing both jobs at this point in time. And we continue to have that collaborative effort with the schools, even with the Morse Pond School, where in the past we've had junior police academies, so that the students get to meet officers and learn what it's all about. And we also make it age appropriate for that particular school, because we do adult education at the police station. So we look forward to continuing this relationship with the school as the school year moves forward.
Wonderful, thank you, Chief Dunn. So at this time, we can open it up for general questions or comments. Andrea, would you like to?
Sure, I can start. Actually, one I should have asked Mr. St. Julian earlier, but he had mentioned the 51A. I was wondering if you could explain what that is so that people in the community don't know the lingo.
Oh, absolutely. So whenever there is a child in crisis, we have to file. We're all mandate reporters, and so we would have to file with the state. And Officer Bryant is a good resource in dealing with that process. So that's basically it. So if there was a child in need and they're in danger, wherever that might be, and we have to go and report that situation to the state. These are our private situations, private documents, and we would report to state, and there'll be someone from the state that will investigate and make sure that the child is safe no matter what.
Thank you. Is there a follow-up question?
I did, yes. So I guess I was interested in, especially since we're looking at this kind of role at the higher level, for our district, how specifically with our new restorative justice practices that we're implementing, how does that mesh in with our school resource officer? We're undergoing trainings and learning new things. And I guess I just want to know how that synergy works.
Is that to me or to someone else?
I don't know, it might be I'm looking at Laura.
Yeah, no,
I don't really
I'll
know
start
the
it out and let
answer.
them add on, but so we started, I think I mentioned it last time, we started our administrative restorative practices for the year in August, and Officer Brandt joined us in that. And as we now have a scheduled training for all staff, Officer Brandt will be a part of the restorative practices training alongside us. So I don't know if Tim or anyone would like to add anything to that.
I think along with the restorative practices kind of falls under the juvenile diversion program at the court. So if you're not aware about that, we're not moving forward with charges right away. We're doing a diversion program where it's either counseling and education or community service. And if they complete that program, and everything's erased, so it's like it never happened. We 100% push for that every time. We don't want to see a kid enter the court system and fall behind in this school. I don't believe in that. So I push the diversion program as much as I can whenever I go to the juvenile clerk. I think that falls into the restorative practices a little bit.
Do you have another question or?
I can hold off, let other people have a chance.
Yeah, Bill.
Officer Brandt, when we first met you, you had mentioned you were going to be going through the basic SRO class. Have you had a chance to do that yet?
You're muted, sorry.
I did, sir. I finished that class. It was a great class. I learned a lot about juveniles and how they grow up and how their brain develops and why they do certain things, and it makes me understand them more and understand their actions more.
Awesome. You mentioned the SRO triad, which I'm assuming you had from that class. And would you just kind of, for those who aren't familiar with that, would you just kind of touch on that and kind of explain what each of the prongs are? I know the law enforcement is kind of the obvious side, but if you could just kind of touch on that SRO triad for us.
Yes, sir. The informal counselor, that's just being the friendly face, being someone that the kids can come to and kind of just counsel them with whatever they need help with. And also, like I said, the conflict mediation that falls into that. It's just, doesn't really go anywhere. It's just an issue that came up that really doesn't need law enforcement involved. So I just kind of take my uniform off, put my suit and tie on, and be kind of a counselor for them. The educator, like Mr. St. Julian said, Ryan and I were at the staff meeting at the end of school a couple weeks ago. That's kind of just educating staff on safety measures in the school and also students with any law enforcement questions or concerns that they might have. And lastly, like you said, the law enforcement officer, that's being a law enforcement officer, but that really comes last in my book. Like I said, I'm not there to be a law enforcement officer as much as I am an informal counselor and educator.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Ryder.
I guess this is for Chief Dunn. Is there that possibility to then pick up a second SRO?
Yes, there is. We're in the process now trying to hire 10 new officers. And once we have the 2 officers, it's always been our long-term plan to have 2 again. One for the high school, because I mean, the high school is a city in itself with the number of students that you have there. And the other one would work between the Lawrence School and the Morse Pond School, so that the transition between the schools, they already have that relationship. So I'm hoping in the future, once I get the department properly staffed, I'll be able to release another officer to be an SRO.
Thank you, sir.
Leah.
I'm just wondering historically when we started having SROs in the school, and was there a reason that we started bringing the SROs in, or just, I don't know, Chief Dunn, if you know that answer, or maybe Terry knows the okay.
It's been many years. The SRO program in Falmouth started under Chief Coolander, and that was, oh Lord, late 80s, early 90s.
Wow.
I can get you the proper time. It was under the terms of when Chief Coolander was here. Since then, we had Chief Cusolito and Chief Riello, and then myself. So it's been many years that we've had the SRO program. It actually got started when the funds dried up for the DARE program. If some of you might remember the DARE program.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, okay.
Just one, and I don't know if it's for the chief or for Lori. So if, I'm wondering how the costs work, because I seem to remember that SROs are picked up half by the district and half by your department, Chief Dunn, is that right?
That's correct. Half the year, the school department pays for his salary, and I pick up the other half.
Okay, so it's not just having enough, although right now it seems to be having enough officers, but also we would need to allocate additional funds if we were going to have.
At one time, there were 2 SROs. We had one in the Lawrence, one in that. So there were funds. Again, as we had to pull the officers out of the schools and put them back on the street, I don't know what happened to those funds, but yeah, that was the program that was when we had both of them, and that's the program that we have one. While the school's in session, the school pays for his salary.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Bill Ryder.
Just curious, in Pennsylvania, we also started this in the 90s, the SRO program. And it was funded by the state at that time initially. State gave money to school districts to hire an SRO. And after a few years, then obviously that went away real quick. And then it became a mutual agreement. Was there ever a time in Massachusetts that the state did fund that? Thank you. That's what I thought.
I don't believe so.
Thank you.
Any other, Andrea?
So Leah was like in my brain, asking some of the historical perspective, because when I saw this on the agenda, and we were talking sort of about the role, I was thinking a lot about how did it come about, and again, not talking about anybody who's in the position and their ability to do such, but I think that idea of when we hear of some of the really key roles about counseling, and we know how important that is. I think just kind of that idea of looking at who is best to do that in our schools and be working with our students like that. And just, I think it's something to think about going forward when we're looking at that, that sort of overarching role. Yeah, what we need individuals, what those bodies need to be doing. Thank you. Kelly.
Yeah, that was sort of my thought as well, because the way that we handle things in school is different. The way that we're moving toward handling all discipline is different than it was when we started having SROs. So as we continue to evolve in restorative justice and whatever that is going to eventually look like, I just want to make sure that the staff matches whatever we need in place to support that, especially if we're going to have to allocate additional funds for a second SRO. I just want to make sure we're really intentional about making sure that the expenses and the staff align with the things that we're already working on putting in place.
Officer Brandt, when you use the term counselor in the SRO triad sense, would you say that role is, as far as counselor is concerned, is more of a mentor, or we're not talking about clinical counseling, right?
Yeah, yes, you're correct. It's more of a mentor, to someone that the students can look up to and be a positive role model for them. Just give them guidance for life. It's not a formal counseling session. They have guidance counselors and adjustment counselors for that.
Right. And NASRO, the National Association's kind of intent of talking about your role as a counselor is more to kind of guide kids who might be on a wayward way, to counsel them, so to speak, as opposed to using enforcement, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa.
So I sort of want to comment in a way with Kelly that to be intentional with our staff and our expenses. However, I think it's extraordinarily important that our SRO remain as part of our overarching plan. I think that I can tell you that as a parent, knowing that there is law enforcement in the building and available, there are some ugly times that don't seem like they were all that far back in history. And I think that having the SRO be part of our intentional and our expenses aligning with our plan is extraordinarily important. I also spoke with two of my children today about what their thoughts are having an officer or someone of law enforcement in the building. And they both, without prompt, because I asked them separately, were very grateful to have the officer there. They really feel like, of course, they've grown up with High Five Fridays, and they've grown up knowing that they're someone that it's just another trusted adult in the building and another resource, like they know that they have teachers as a resource, and they have guidance counselors as a resource, and they have their coaches as resources. and their administrators, and now we have a officer as a resource. So I too hope that we continue to keep it part of our intentional staff and intentional expense and continue with our long-term plan.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, thank you all for joining us this evening. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate the conversation.
you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye, good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, next on our agenda is the update on the fall town meeting item. And so I'm just going to briefly read the article so that we all have context as to what the item is. It is Article 10. I'm going to abbreviate some of it. To see if the town of Falmouth will vote to appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds an amount of money to be expended under the direction of the school committee for the roof replacement project at T-Ticket Elementary School, for which the town has applied for a school construction grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, referred to as MSBA. The town acknowledges that the MSBA grants program is not entitled discretionary program based on need as determined by the MSBA. And if the MSBA's board of director votes to invite the town to collaborate with the MSBA on their proposed repair project, any project costs the town incurs in excess of any grant that may be approved by or received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the town. So in reference to the MSBA grant, in August, we were awarded a little over $1.3 million. That's just for some background information. And I'm going to ask Patrick to speak further on this item.
Sure.
Hi.
So thanks, and thanks for reading that out. That gives great context. So this is the story about the T-Ticket roof project that we've been talking about for the past year and a half, 2 years. In August, the MSBA board received the estimate from the OPM, owner's project manager and architect, for the project, and voted on the reimbursement rate for the town. It's actually a pro forma kind of rate that the town qualifies for. And then in May, as you know, the town did vote to exclude this, meaning that it would be debt funded. But what we're looking for in November is for the town meeting to actually vote on funding the project. And the estimated overall project right now is $3,723,264. That's with contingencies and OPM and architect costs. But the MSBA grant would be for up to that $1,389,523, or a reimbursement rate of 37, a little over 37%. So that's what's happening. We've been staying in touch with the town all along. That language, it's language that the MSBA put together. And once we get the vote from the town, we'll move forward with creation of final bid documents and going out to bid and all that kind of fun and games in December, January. But the timeline is to continue to move forward to do this project next summer.
Great, thank you for that. Any questions for Patrick? Oh, Kelly.
I'm sure you said it, but I definitely missed it. Where the funding is from, if this passes at town meeting, is it going to the ballot, or is it just all debt?
It's all done then. It's all done then, because in May, the town did vote to approve debt funding, that this project could be debt funded. So it's sort of it's all done if the town meeting votes on it. We had to sort of flip Falmouth's process, normal process, on its head because of the MSBA timeline that has been, delayed like a lot of things. So you're right. Previously, it would have been sort of reversed.
The other way. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Patrick? Seeing none, thank you so much. I appreciate it. hopefully the town approves that.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick.
And just a sidebar, town meeting is November 15th.
And I do think we're gonna have, even though I think we have already heard about the flipped process, I think we're gonna hear about it again at town meeting. As long as we can explain why we're backwards. Yeah, and I think we're okay.
Sounds good. Next is the update on the carousel of lights. Could we promote Troy, please?
He is, he just came.
There you are. Okay, good evening, Troy. Oh, I see your chair.
Oh, boy, hold on. I don't know how that is. Let me
There
see.
you are.
Here we go. There we go.
Good evening. Hi, Troy.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the school committee, and thank you for this opportunity to visit with you just for a few minutes. Let me start by just thanking you once again for your support. We had another great season at Mullen Hall School. I will schedule a time to get together with the superintendent to deliver our check. So for the 7th season, we now, as you know, had a bit of a shortened season at the Carousel of Light, but we're able to provide over 15,000 rides. And so we're up over 135,000 since we've been on the grounds of Mullen Hall. We're just profoundly grateful for the partnership and support of the school committee and the town. So really my main purpose of being here tonight was just to thank you for that support and really to update you on our continued efforts to find a permanent home. Since the town meeting in January, we've worked hard to do some community engagement and some outreach. Just a few weeks ago, we invited town meeting members through an email for the email addresses that were available on the town's website to come and have a site visit and just walk around and ask questions and see the carousel. It was unfortunately not in operation for its last week or so. There was some mechanical issues. We actually have what's called a certified maintenance mechanic that actually is on site and does an inspection every day of the operation. And there were some issues with the motor, and we couldn't order a new one in time. We ordered a new one, and that one was faulty. At any rate, we had a site visit, had several town meeting members attend, some who had some concerns previously. And I think by being on the site and being able to actually see where our proposed permanent site is, we were able to answer a lot of questions. That outreach continues. As you probably know, we continue to work with the select board and the town manager, and we'll be returning to town meeting in November to try to gain support for the location that we've discussed several times with you. We're really trying to step up our engagement. I think that the Zoom nature of the last town meeting inhibited our ability to not only have a fruitful dialogue, but to show the community support that we had gathered, including folks that had served the community in the school department as employees and even as superintendents. So we're hopeful that we can move forward. Again, we're still very, very grateful for your support. We know that there's still a community dialogue that needs to occur. And between now and November, we will continue that in lots of different ways and different mediums, just trying to provide the public an opportunity not only to learn, but to ask questions and engage. We're intent that the communication be two-way. So once again, we're very grateful for your support. This was our 7th season, and it continues to be just, we believe, a real community jewel. And one thing that I think we don't mention enough, we talk about the horses and the fact that they were carved by a local artist. but the mechanism that actually allows those horses to spin is the same mechanism that that sits outside the Smithsonian on the National Mall. It's a 1947 Allen Herschel mechanism. So the mechanism itself is an antique and a relic that deserves preserving. So we believe that the momentum is building. That the mechanical issues we had this year, I think, are due in part to the fact that because the mechanism is old, there's some wear and tear by taking it down and putting it up every year. And so the permanent location will give us the ability to not have that stress on the mechanism and to be able to have it long term and to be able to revitalize parts of it. And having a permanent location will give us the ability to fundraise and really be able to really give it the attention and the TLC that it needs. So for all of those reasons, we continue to be hopeful and optimistic that the community will support us. But again, to say it again, we're grateful for your support and really glad that for another year we've been able to bring memories to both residents and visitors and kids of all ages. I'm happy to answer any questions you have, but really the purpose of my visit was to give you an update on where we're at and to share my gratitude with you.
Thank you so much, Troy. And quick question, the language of the article, is it the same language used in the spring or did it change in any way?
That's a great question. And no, I'm glad you brought that up because I intended to. And I actually just got home from work, so I was rushing and I didn't think to mention that. The language is identical, so it reflects all of the conditions and the priorities set forth by the school committee in your previous vote.
Great. Okay, thank you. Kelly.
Okay, so that brings up a question for me because there was actually an error in the printing of the warrant in this January one that missed. I can't remember what it was for, something about fencing, I think. And I don't have the warrant for November in front of me, but I just want to make sure that that the language that is in the November one matches what we actually voted, not the error in the printing. Am I making sense? Do you know what I'm saying?
You are making sense.
Okay.
Yes, now that you
Yes.
said it.
I can answer that question if
Oh,
possible.
great, thanks. Yes.
So yes, what I actually provided the language, was working closely with Attorney Duffy throughout the process in preparation for the select board meeting. He actually asked me to provide the language for the last article. And when I did, I made sure that notation for the fencing was in there. So I've not seen the printed warrant, but I can tell you with certainty that at the discussion with the select board and the language that I actually provided to them for inclusion in the warrant, that additional language of the fencing was in there.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Troy? Seeing none, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your rushing back to town to meet with us.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
night. Thank you so much for your continued support.
Appreciate it. Take care. Okay, next is our presentation of the use of ESSER funds. Hello, Patrick.
Hi. So ESSER grant ESSER 1, 2, and 3 have been the primary ways that school districts have been funded through the federal government to support our efforts to get through the pandemic. We are using ESSER 2 funds now. We had some rollover available to us from last year. That combined with the ESSER 3 funds that will become available to the district in October, we will have a total of approximately $4.1 million available. Those funds are supposed to last us, or we're allowed to use them for 3 fiscal years. So this year, the following year, and then the year after that. This year, after our work last year, after conversations with staff and the community, we started the school year and we are on pace with additional staffing, and we are on pace to spend approximately $2.1 million that little over $4 million. And if I was going to break that down into the categories, just general staffing categories, there would be 3 categories. I would call them temporary, weekly, monthly workers, which include our building-based substitutes and any of our school monitors. We have approximately 45 of those positions spread across the district. We have what I would refer to as district-wide staff, which really is our healthcare workers, whether it's nurses, health assistants, CNAs, folks that are helping us with tracing. We have 12 of those folks across the district. And then the third bucket is instructional staff, which would be coaches, student adjustment counselors, some PTs, other specialists like that. And those were people that were not, were not funded in the local budget per se. So and then finally, we do have money in there as we've expanded our relationship with Gosnold and enhanced their services in the school district too. So so that's what we're doing with the money. We are focusing it again on providing the additional staff the school district needs and that our students need to continue to rebound from last year. Falmouth is in a very, very fortunate position compared to many other districts. Many districts are using these funds to upgrade their facilities. So the HVAC systems, those types of things that needed to get done, as opposed to providing these additional temporary staff. So we are feeling good about where we are standing right now with children back in the schools and the support we're providing to the schools and students. We will do what we always do every spring and summer is evaluate where we are, evaluate what children need, so that when we get into next fall, the breakdown might look a bit different, but it'll be based upon student needs.
Great, thank you. Questions for Patrick? Well, that's wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing your update on the ESSER funds. Thank you. Oh, sure. Leah, sorry.
Not to Patrick. I have actually to Dr. Dora. I'm just wondering around student needs, just in my work right now, I'm having many newly arrived immigrant families come into our school system. And I'm wondering if Falmouth is also experiencing that, and just as far as thinking of funding needs and supports.
So we have had an increase, and we added a 0.5 ELD teacher this year as well. So we added that 0.5 last year. I'm looking at Sonia, I think that's, so last school year it was a 0.5, we had another 0.5 this year. So we are assessing, or I should give Dr. Tallier the credit there, is assessing the needs every year and then advocating for us to support.
And is this part of ESSER funding right now, or was that part of the budget?
I'm gonna have to turn to Patrick on how we.
There is a position in ESSER funding.
In ESSER, one position in
One.
ESSER.
Yeah.
Might be that one, 0.5.
It's probably 0.5.
Andrea, so I know that Lori, you convened all of the different meetings to talk to the community to get the input on that. So I guess I just want to get the transition from the information you collected there and what you heard to how that lays out in what we're doing with those funds.
It continued to be the theme throughout all the meetings, starting with the staff sessions at all the schools in June, and then the 3 summer family forums, and then the one that we just finished the evening one last week. And that they were interested in what the staff had felt. And mostly that was they wanted the support staff, and we were able to fund all the support staff that they were requesting. And the families were pleased that we were able to add the additional staff. And then the second theme throughout was around the SEL. And so being able to increase staff and services, we feel like we're in a good position of addressing.
And I think people were very clear that this is all temporary, even though, because knowing that we have 3 years to spend this, I could see how it could be, people could become very comfortable and used to having all these extra bodies on hand that, you know, we obviously really, really need right now, but that it cannot continue to go on because these funds are not recurring at this moment.
So that was part of all of our discussions at all the meetings. Patrick and I will be visiting schools again this year and some additional forums for families, and that message will, you know, clearly this was about COVID and getting us through COVID, and that was additional staff. So we're doing our best to make that clear.
Great. Terry, I wonder if anybody's going to look, a couple of high school teachers said that there seems to be a spark missing in kids. This is like intellectually, not emotionally. And I guess if you sit around, if you think sweatpants companies must have made a lot of money last year. So to get out of that sweatpant mode, it's just a little slow starting. Are we gonna look at that? I mean, I don't want to say test the kids or anything like that, but has anybody thought about looking at that or anything?
So I'm not sure what to say to that, except that it's the beginning, still be beginning school year. We came back with a lot of new rules and new programs that we started. It's the first that I'm hearing about it. All the teachers that I've talked to, so the kids are really excited about being back.
Yeah,
are very engaged. They're really happy to be working with each other. So I'm going to take that back to our team and we'll talk about that.
No, I just heard a couple of comments. Maybe it's not, maybe it's just not that big of a deal, but it dawned on me, because I'm not as ambitious as I was 2 years ago, because I'm older, but.
I can't remember what it was. It'll come to me. Oh, that Andrea had mentioned that a lot of these positions are temporary, but I would assume that something like the ELD position, that services that we have to continue. So not only are we going to lose a number of positions that we've added because ESSER funds are going to run out, but there are going to be places where the need has grown and we're going to have to absorb into our already shrinking budget those additional positions. It's just, I think I'm sharing what Andrea is pointing out, that it's just going to feel, we're going to go from feeling really flush to incredibly tight in a very short amount of time. And it makes me nervous that families are going to feel like they're getting the short end of the stick. It's just, no matter how many times we can say it, it's
When you
weighing.
describe the reality.
Yeah, it's scary.
And we have to do that every year, right?
Yeah.
Every, winter, spring time, we have to reassess what the needs are. And we have to make decisions. And sometimes those are tough decisions to meet the needs of the kids.
It's gonna be hard for us too, to see that happen. Any other questions for either Patrick or Lori? Okay, thank you again, Patrick. Next, presentation on elementary MCAS and benchmark data. Dr. Tellier.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I have several colleagues who are going to be joining me in presenting the data and telling our story and making the connections. So as they come in, I would just like to frame our presentation a little bit. First, I would like to talk about my gratitude for this team of 4 to come and present with us this evening. Their experience, expertise, and their care for both colleagues and students hopefully will stand out and shine in their presentation, but I just want to start with expressing that This past year was characterized in many headlines as a lost year. However, our data does not match that characterization. And so this evening, I welcome Dr. Erin Custodio, our elementary literacy manager, Jamie Raposa, our early learning coach, and Robin Bowerman and Stacy Strong, our elementary math coaches, who are going to join us and take over the presentation and talking about our data and helping explain how our students in particular in the elementary schools fared in the past year and set the stage for the direction we're taking this year, connecting both their benchmark assessment data to the initial reporting of MCAS at this grade level. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them, and I'm going to set up the slides. All right. So this again is our team, and I'm going to turn it over to Robin and Stacy.
Thank you, Dr. Tellier. Good evening, everyone. So the data tells a story for mathematics in Falmouth. I'm excited to share with you the first slide that's going to just set up some background information you need to understand the next slide that you're going to see. You're going to see some bar graphs that have these colors. The deep magenta is showing the percentage of Falmouth districts that are students who are high risk. By high risk, this means that for these students to meet the expected benchmark by the end of the year, they're going to need some intense interventions. The lighter color pink are some risk. These are students who can meet the benchmark by the end of the year for that grade level with some intervention. The two purple colors, the darker purple and the lighter purple. The darker purple is called low risk, but I really want you to think about that as on target to meet the benchmark by the end of the year. These are students who, given the mainstream education, you know, the tier 1 curriculum, they should meet the benchmark. And then the lighter purple are the advanced students that have been identified. So now we're set up to see some of these graphs. I'm muted.
Thank you, Stacy. So the first graph that we're looking at is grades 1 through 4, and it shows the math growth from fall 2019, which was pre-pandemic, to fall 2020, which was our mid-pandemic season, after our interrupted spring. And our students at greatest risk actually decreased by 1% from 9% to 8%. The Fs indicate fall to fall. Our students at some risk decreased by 5%. So there was an overall reduction of 6% in the risk category. That 6% moved into the low risk and college pathways categories, which had an increase of 6% overall. This shows there was no detrimental impact overall of the interruption to in-person learning. The mobilization of technology and the strategies to support remote learning in the first months of the pandemic were successful. The next slide is showing the actual pandemic year. So from fall 2020 last year to spring of 2021. And again, we see that our highest risk students decreased by 2%. Our some risk students increased by 3%, and our low risk and college pathways both decreased slightly. And that was during the pandemic year. The next graph is showing fall of 2020 to this fall of 2021. And we see that our most at-risk students decreased by 2%. Our low risk or our some risk students stayed steady. Our college pathways and increased by 5%. The pre-pandemic benchmarks are inclusive of the participation. We have a summer learning challenges, our summer acceleration academy, and the early learning and math instructional coaching initiatives and ongoing support would have been responsible for those changes. We also had weekly Zooms during the summer to support students and families who were participating in the summer learning challenges. This graph is indicating that the grades 1 through 4 actually improved 1% from the benchmarks from fall of 2019 to fall of 2021. This is grades 1 through 4. The kindergarten data that we previously used the oral diagnostic test to assess basic skill proficiency. And going forward, kindergarten data will be available using the early math assessment tool with our FastBridge universal screening. Although we expected to see a decline in the overall aggregate results compared to Falmouth's year-to-year data, which is both a statewide and national trend, when we isolate the comparison and look at the state versus Falmouth as we do every year, we can see that Falmouth is widening its margin of positive performance. So this MCAS graph is comparing spring of 2019 pre-pandemic to spring 2021. And the maroon column is Falmouth Public Schools. The lighter column is the state. So as you can see, grade 3 on the left in spring of 2019, the Falmouth Public Schools had 48% meeting or exceeding expectations compared to the state's 49%. Grade 4 had 53% in Falmouth as compared to 49% against the state. In spring of 2021, we have 39% of our students in grade 3 meeting and exceeding expectations as compared to the 33% for the state. And in 4th grade, it was 44% compared to the 33% for the state. These measures indicate how well students are achieving against the math curriculum frameworks. The MCAS are indicative of one data point taken on a specific day. And of course, this year, the test was abbreviated. And the FastBridge measures, which are responsible for the slides prior to this, are taken at regular intervals throughout the year. So it's more than just a one-day assessment. So what does the data tell us? There's a lot of information here. I just want to highlight that last spring we identified that Fluency is an initiative for the 2021-2022 school year, and we are reshaping our multi-pronged approach to improve automaticity. The FastBridge Universal Screening suite of assessments that we have used in the past, we've expanded to improve our ability to assess and monitor the FACT fluency, because this is the first time we have been able to isolate this skill and measure it. And finally, we will be introducing a variety of new tools from the FastBridge Universal Screening Program to improve differentiation and intervention to support all tiers of our students. Instructional initiatives that are ongoing. We have our new ST Math program that we started last year. Our goal is to increase completion rate to 70% of a grade level curriculum for each student to support improvement of individual achievement levels and to implement the high quality instructional materials preparation, analysis, selection, and implementation. We also want to remain conscious of the spring 2021 DESE issued acceleration roadmap, which focuses on critical skills. Although there is a lot of conversation about learning loss over the pandemic, the data is showing that our children are maintaining their skills and has shown growth, and we have implemented a plan to improve that growth and automaticity. Thank you so much. And now I'll turn over to Dr. Custodio.
I am actually going to start by handing things over to Jamie Raposa, our early learning coach, so that she can go over the kindergarten literacy data.
Good evening. You'll notice here that you're not going to see the types of bar graphs that you saw previously for math. And the biggest reason for that is the way that we're assessing our kindergarten and our first grade students this year looks a little bit different than it has in the past. We have switched over to using our FastBridge suite of assessments, which we feel is much more age appropriate. And they offer a lot more data and some instructional intervention tools that are providing our teachers with ways to intervene when they find that students are not meeting their benchmarks. But here you have some historical data. So kindergartners in the past have been assessed on letter naming fluency. And you can see that compared from 2019 to the spring of 2021, kindergartners, 36% were well below average, which was only 6% in 2019. In addition, our nonsense word fluency test, that data wasn't nearly as concerning. We had 50% that performed in the below average range and no students into the well below average range. So what this kind of tells us is students are really lacking their automaticity in their letter naming. So they know these skills, but they don't have them at the rate that we'd like to see them have them. They're able to then apply them to a skill like nonsense word fluency and decoding unfamiliar words. But we need them to be able to do it at a higher rate of automaticity, so they just have them committed to memory and things move a little bit faster, and that will see an improvement in all areas of reading from phonics all the way to fluency. We hope to have a lot more data to share come the end of the year once we have our new assessments, having done all 3 screenings, to have some new comparative data for kindergarten. Dr. Custodio.
Thank you, Jamie. As you can see, the graphs for reading are, they were designed to look exactly like the graphs that we used in math to make sure that everybody understands exactly how to read them. And so again, from fall 2019, pre-pandemic, to fall 2020, mid-pandemic, our students at greatest risk increased by 2%. Our students at some risk in that lighter pink category increased by 4%, for an overall increase of 6% in the at-risk category. It appears that those 6% moved from the low risk category path, the darker purple that you see. The college pathway category decreased by only 1%. This shows that there was really no detrimental impact on the interruption to in-person learning, and that efforts and strategies put in place to support remote learning in the first months of the pandemic were indeed effective. Last school year, so from last fall, actually, I think we may have skipped one. Could we go back? Fall 2020 to spring, perfect. One more ahead, thank you. There we are, thank you so much. Last school year, the percentage of our most at-risk students actually did not change. So we stayed at 15%. The at some risk category increased by 8%, and the low risk category decreased by 1%. With our college pathway students decreasing by 7% from fall to spring. It is important to note that these changes are really not all that significant, considering how many students were in remote situations and that the number of COVID-related absences was really at times quite high. So here we have the data that shows growth from fall 2019 to fall of 2020 for A reading. And what we do see is that our most at-risk students decreased by 4% altogether. Some risks stayed, actually, I'm sorry, I think we're on the wrong, did we go, I think we might have skipped one slide. I'm reading from the wrong thing, I apologize. Could we go back one slide? Thank you. Beautiful. So grades 1 through 4, the A reading growth from fall 2019 to fall 2020, we can see that our really high risk group decreased by 2%, which is fantastic. Our some risk group decreased by 4%. And then in terms of the low risk category, we just had a 1% change there. We lost a little bit in that area, but what was really incredible to celebrate was that the college pathway actually grew. We grew there by 6%. So that's some really exciting data to celebrate for sure. From just in terms of isolating the last school year, the last complete school year that we just finished in spring of 2021, the percentage of our most at-risk students did not change. It was quite remarkable to see that the high-risk category and the some risk category stayed absolutely steady at 10% and 18%. The low-risk category decreased by 4%, but the college pathway actually increased by 4%. It is important to note that these changes are very encouraging considering that many students were indeed remote and that the number of COVID-related absences was again at times quite significant. Looking at the data from fall 2020 to fall 2021, our most at-risk students increased by 2%, but the some risk category decreased by 3%. The percentage of low-risk students decreased by 7%, but the college pathway students increased from 8% from fall to fall, and that is really truly a victory. Again, some of the things that we can credit to that success would probably the summer learning challenges, the summer acceleration academy, the implementation of Foundations, which is our new phonics program that we rolled out last year, and ongoing coaching. In this next slide, what I would like to do is, actually, I think we may have skipped one. Perfect. Thank you so much. They look very much alike. So I did want to dig a little bit deeper for everyone to understand exactly what the impact on our younger grades looks like versus the impact of our older kids. And yes, grade 4, for those of us in elementary, we tend to look at those as our big guys. And so as you can see, in terms of just oral reading fluency from 2019 to 2020, we can see that students in first grade really saw a very significant decline in their ability to read fluently, which that basically includes reading rate and accuracy, and automaticity is a piece that contributes to that. And so if you look at grade 4, you can see that there was not much of a decline from 2019. There was actually improved scores from 2019 to 2020, where we went from 29% not meeting benchmark to only 27% of students not meeting benchmark. And then, yes, we did have a slight increase on the number of students in grade 4 who did not meet the benchmark for oral reading fluency. But as you can see, the column to the right-hand column for grade 1, and the right-hand column on grade 4 really do tell us a bit of the story, and that grade 1 was certainly more significantly impacted by the interrupted school year than was our students in grades 3 and 4 who already do have some established literacy skills. Slide is really cool though, because what it does show is that despite the fact that there was a major decline in students in grade 1, their oral reading fluency abilities, as we can see, their applied reading, the A reading test is a computer adaptive measure that basically asks students to, read a passage, answer questions about it. It tests vocabulary, different sorts of things that basically require them to take what they know about letters and sound and how words work and apply it. And so what we can take from this is while students are not reading as quickly, they're lacking automaticity, they're lacking fluency, they are indeed accessing passages and are able to make sense of them, and their comprehension really has not did not change from the fall of 2019 to the fall of 2020, which we realize really is the ultimate goal of reading. So there we go. There's our MCAS slide. So this was really incredible to look at. Off our results really mirrored that of what we saw in math, although we expected to see a decline in the overall aggregate results compared to Falmouth's year-to-year data, which is both a national trend and a statewide trend. It is really encouraging to see that Falmouth Public Schools is still outperforming the state in terms of the percentage who are meeting and exceeding expectations. And that is true across the board for both grades 3 and 4. As you can see, pre-pandemic, spring 2019. It's also the case here in spring of 2021. So while we did see a dip in scores as we expected, we are still outperforming the state, which is very encouraging. In terms of instructional next steps for teachers, we are spending a lot of time this year working on utilizing the FastBridge suite of assessments to focus on dynamic progress monitoring to ensure that progress monitoring of student skills is dynamic and frequent, and that we use the data that we receive from the universal screenings to effectively and specifically tailor instruction for all students, not just students who are at risk, but for all students. We are facilitating the continued professional development for classroom teachers, reading specialists, and special educators in FastBridge, as well as the benchmark assessment system. And we continue to grow proficiency with foundations for kindergarten through grade 3, an initiative that was rolled out last year. Instructional next steps for students. We aim to stay on pace with the scope and sequence at Tier 1, while paying more attention to attending to core skills in a Tier 2 nature. So basically like whole class intervention for skills that the class might be lacking, but making sure to stay on target with grade level standards and skills as well. And yes, the Foundations curriculum will play a vital role in this literacy work. In terms of in-class intervention, we have worked on training teachers to utilize strategy groups to reach more students more frequently, and to utilize the Reading Strategies book as a tool that gives information and lessons on utilizing strategy groups. And we are employing the FastBridge recommended research-based interventions and progress monitoring on those interventions. And that wraps up our presentation, and we would like to open this up to anyone who may have questions or comments about what they've seen.
Wonderful. I know that I'm sure we have lots of questions because there's a lot of information in there. Leah, would you like to lead?
Yeah, so I'm wondering about the why or possible why around
Yes.
looking at
Hello.
looking at
So
our
on top
early-
of all of these, on top of all of these reports, it's really important that with all of this data and celebrations, all of this would not have been possible without all of the hard work and dedication from teachers who truly made this possible. So we just want to keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Yeah. So my question is, looking at our youngest learners, our kindergartners, it looks like with that 36% well below versus the 6% that was the year before, that was just such a striking contrast. And I'm wondering if, overall, it really looks like students didn't have a huge decline. So I'm wondering what the thought is for our youngest learner teachers, like what they're thinking about. I think it was around letter recognition. Was that it? So is there a reason that's, is that tied to, were there more absences for kindergartners? Or I'm just thinking about what could have been that letter recognition declined so much?
I think the big thing that we've looked at behind that is the inability for students to participate in cooperative groupings. So that's a huge part of our early childhood curriculum. Students are able to take the skills that they're learning in direct instruction opportunities and then apply them in small group literacy centers. Because of COVID regulations, we weren't able to participate in those types of activities. So they didn't have that kind of follow-up experience and the cooperative experiences that they normally would have. So that piece was missing. Also, with our staggered arrival and departure times, kindergartners lost, some of their school day. So it wasn't quite as long as it was in the past. So, we focused on definitely the fundamental skills and made sure that we were teaching all of the things that needed to be taught, but there wasn't that opportunity for some of the small group time that, lends itself to the kindergarten curriculum and being able to practice those skills in a hands-on sort of cooperative setting like we normally would.
I just have a follow-up question to that. Thank you. I think that completely makes sense, that social aspect of learning. Were remote students included in all of the assessments? And was there any comparison between remote versus in-person for all of this data, I guess, so not just you?
We didn't separate out remote students versus in-person students. I would say that all students were assessed. Sometimes the assessments, went off better than others in terms of the limitations with doing them over Zoom. However, at the end of the year, we did invite students that were remote in to do end of the year in-person screening outside so that we could get a real better picture of what they had learned and be able to do those in person. And I would say the majority of our remote families did participate in that. So we got a real true picture at the end of the year of where their skills were.
Okay. And that also might have impacted some of those results too. If students weren't used to being in person and then came and took an assessment, right? So that makes sense too. Yeah. All right, thank you so much.
So I just have a quick question to piggyback on Leah's train of thought. So regarding the kindergartners, could you speak to some of the interventions that we are doing this year for the now first graders to help them sort of gain some momentum?
So the first thing that we're doing is we're really taking a close look at the data. So some of the time, especially in our first grade cohort, where we are seeing some deficits and gaps, some of those things where within an entire class, if we're seeing that many students have the same areas of need, we're making sure that we're doing a whole group intervention for the entire class. And then we're also targeting small groups of students that have similar skill deficits in their small group tier 2 and tier 3 instruction. Like I know Erin had talked about before, our new Fast Bridge system, they are able to, based on how the children performed on the subtests, they're able to formulate where the main need is for the student. They can identify a plan for the student in terms of an intervention plan and specific research-based activities that can be used as targeted intervention strategies. So all of those things will come into play. In addition, now having the second year of foundations and continued training with that, I think students will be seeing that now for the second year. And so hopefully that will continue to grow in their phonics development. So all of those things combined, I think, and now also not having the limitations in the classroom in terms of instructional groupings and cooperative opportunities. I think that students will have a much better opportunity this year to fill in those gaps and make continued progress.
Wonderful, thank you. Bill, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, in reference to the MCAS math questions, I know it was kind of said that we are outperforming the state, which of course is, you know, we always want to be the higher standard. But I don't know if you can go back to that graph, but I want to make sure I saw that correctly, that while we are outperforming the state, did I see correctly that in 3rd and 4th grade, we actually dropped 9% over the last 2 years?
Yeah.
Okay, and I guess the follow-up to that then is I'm wondering if you have any kind of ideas or insights as to where or why that may have occurred, or what we're doing to kind of boost that back up.
So, yes, you are reading the graph correctly, and as has been stated previously, there were a lot of impacts to our students' ability to increase their learning in math that we also saw in some of the ELA side of things. Again, it was due to the remote learning to a certain extent, the interruptions within the classroom. The instruction was there, but we did not have the opportunity for students to work collaboratively and do that inter-peer game development based on math games. And again, the quarantine situation that did interrupt periodically throughout the year. We also are doing or are increasing the use of the Fast Bridge system to identify whole group lessons that need to be included, as well as small group interventions. We have the second year of our ST Math program, which is a research-based puzzle solving program that allows students to proceed at their own rate, or the teacher can assign specific topics and objectives related to what they're teaching in class, as well as use prior year specific objectives to help fill in the gaps of where students might be missing skills, or a situation where they need some scaffolding prior to accessing the on-grade level objective that the class will be doing.
I jumped on that, Tim.
Thank you. So is it your feeling that when, with the students being in person class full-time, that will significantly help bring that back to where we were?
I would say yes. I think that something that really needs to to be taken into account is that there was a learning curve for the students, but particularly last year, there was an enormous learning curve for the teachers to learn how to use the tools to teach students in a completely foreign environment. So you asked what may have toggled that. I mean, we had it was a heavy lift, an extremely heavy lift on the backs of the teachers, and an amazing plan put in place, you know, thought out, right? But that is, if that is taken away, I've heard teachers say, wow, like compared to last year, like this just feels so much easier.
And I just want to clarify too that across the Commonwealth, the decline in the number of students meeting or exceeding for grade 3 and grade 4 mathematics, the percent decline was 16% in each of those grades. And for us, as you noted, it was 9%. So even in the challenges that we faced, to see that we were able to still maintain a smaller margin and be able to continue to find means of supporting our students, I think is particularly important, but also knowing that we have a direct plan and we're using the data to monitor our progress in regular increments is also equally important.
Thank you.
Bill, is your hand up?
I'm not sure where to start. There's been a lot of data thrown at us. But when I think of the last year with all the challenges and the collection of data on all these students, and then the evaluation of those students for the possibility of summer programs, which was mentioned. So my concern was, if there's the need, how did we evaluate kids for summer school programs? How many kids participated in summer school programs? And what was the growth of that summer school program? Did we collect that data as well? Because obviously, anytime we do testing, we do data collection. So that concerns me because obviously if I'm behind, if I'm summer school, and then the other thing with summer school, were we Zoom, remote, or were we in person? Those are just things I'm kind of kicking around, and we really like some answers to those things.
Sure. So for the Summer Learning Challenge, the first one that was referenced, we made that available to every student and every family in the district. We promoted the resources at the beginning of the summer, and then we made both a literacy and a math drop-in session available for any family that wanted to clarify directions, have additional support, or for students who wanted to check in. So that one was available to everybody. Specifically this summer, we chose to take advantage of the entitlement funding from the Department of Education and have a Summer Acceleration Academy, which was 1 week, 5 days, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. each of the 5 days. And there were specific requirements of the grant. So we needed to focus on literacy for grades 1 and 2. And we needed to focus on math for grades 3 and 4. And we used largely the spring benchmark data from last year as an indication, not having the MCAS data yet, and trying to rely on the system that we had in place. And then also teacher recommendations. And then we continue to do targeted instruction and intervention. Again, in one of those two areas, students didn't receive both because that was the way the program was designed at the state level. And then going into, they did a post-assessment there and then their fall benchmark. So the Summer Acceleration Academy was the week of August 23rd through the 27th. So we timed it to be very close to the beginning of the year and help those students accelerate their way into the beginning of the year. And we had, you asked again about number, we had nearly 200 students who participated, and we did it in person in the students' elementary school. So if a student was attending T-Ticket and was participating, they went to T-Ticket. And teachers from each of those schools were hired to be our instructors for the summer. So it was also familiar faces for our students as well.
Thank you.
Any other for Terry? Did you have your hand up?
I did. In trying to follow this data, there's a couple of things that I have a real hard time wrapping my head around. One is when you, well, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of data, but if you're measuring third graders in 2019 and 2021, they're different people. So how can the results, how can you compare them if it's different people? I mean, that was one thing. And the other thing too is the MCASs are different. So how can you like make comparisons if you have a different style of a test that's spread out or short? It's abbreviated this time. So all in all, though, I don't really think that's important to answer that question for me. It just, all in all, I think it's not as bad as we feared. So I think that should be our bottom line, is that it isn't as bad as we feared.
Thank you, Terry. We would like to agree with you. So we will provide you with the slides. There was some professional development today, specifically around the intervention tools and the fall FastBridge assessment that allowed for some additional revisions to the content in the slides as we were also taking information and reflection from those sessions. And just as you said, you know, with the MCAS, we're asked to be very cautious in comparisons that we make, especially knowing that it's an abbreviated test. But to help us understand the data, we're looking to make comparisons in similar, perhaps not exact, but similar ways to how we have in the past. So we have a place from which to work in understanding the impact. But the final point, which is actually the first one that you brought up, was when we look at the 2019, what makes that important for us to look at each cohort going forward is that those norms were set when school wasn't interrupted. And if each of the cohorts coming after that are able to make a significant showing of growth and achievement against that, that's a real indication that their growth is even bigger than we can measure if they're staying close to those original benchmarks.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you all. That was a wonderful presentation, very dense, and we appreciate it. Thank you. Next, Lori, overview of social emotional learning supports.
Yes, so based on the request from the school committee last meeting, we're going to provide a summary. I know this is some of the information that you've heard before, but I think it's valuable to repeat some of the great things that we're doing in the district. But before I turn it over to Dr. Woodward, I just wanted to say that Dr. Woodward and I attended the Commerce Choice stakeholder breakfast this morning. Fiona Jensen, as you know, is retiring at the end of this year. And we were able to meet and hear from Emily Smalley, which will take over as the next Chief Executive Officer of Commerce Choice. And we will, you know, all miss Fiona greatly, but I think that they made an excellent choice in the new leadership moving forward. And Emily has been with Commerce Choice since 2017. So I hope to have Emily here at a school committee meeting, you know, in sometime in the near future so that we can meet Emily. And I'm very pleased to say that we're, Dr. Woodward and I met with Fiona and Emily and Patty a couple weeks ago. And we, although we loved the sessions that were virtual last year, we're very pleased that they'll be back in person this year. And we will be able to offer consistent and widespread services to all of our elementary students this year from Commerce Choice. So, Dr. Woodward.
Hello. So good evening and thank you for allowing me another opportunity to share out an overview and an update of the social social emotional supports and services that we're providing within the district. I'd like to start with framing the conversation on, as I had previously shared, that the district, we've committed to use the K-8 DESA, which is the Devereaux screener. So in K-8 and the high school edition, we're utilizing the mini screener and the full screeners as our social emotional assessment tool, which will be used as our vehicle for progress monitoring, and it'll help us to identify how we move forward with our SEL curriculum. And that's across the tiered continuum. So just to recap and provide a little bit more information now that we're in the start of this school year, the DESA suite, it's the social emotional learning, it's assessments, and it provides us as educators the ability to build a measurable and actionable social and emotional learning program with really reliable assessments. It's important to know that the DESA is empirical standardized social and emotional competency assessment. And again, like I said, now that we have the high school edition, it now covers students in grades kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. Whereas prior to this school year, this September, the DESA screener, both mini and full screener, were only available for our students in grades kindergarten through 8th grade. So we're very excited about that. We've also purchased the Aperture suite, which is the, it provides us with the additional resources. So we've got this empirical, we have this empirical standardized social emotional assessment tool. It's grounded in resiliency theory, and it directly aligns to the CASEL frameworks. And I know we've talked specifically about the CASEL frameworks previously. So like I said, when we secured the district Aperture suite, in addition to taking the assessment data, the Aperture suite provides us with metrics at the district, building, classroom, and individual student level. And then it provides us with resources for district administrators, building administrators, teachers, and related service providers as identified by the student. So it really helps us to identify, and not only just strengths, typical, and needs improvement, it breaks it down into very specific social emotional curriculum components. So it's very targeted. So as I had reported out last year, at the end of the year, we were able to, after identifying the screener that we were doing, we were able to identify, administer the DESI mini screener to all the students in kindergarten through grade 8. So I just want to share very briefly the just a glimpse into those results. So I am going to share my screen, and let me put this in presenter mode. Well, I don't know if you're seeing that in presenter mode, but here we go. So we had in our students in kindergarten through grade 6 last year in June, with all that we had going on, our dedicated, amazing, diligent school administrators and teaching staff were able to administer a participation rate of 90.5% of our student body in grades kindergarten through grade 6. What's important to know is that the DESA uses T-scores. So it's an 8-question mini screener. It gets scored. If a child comes up with a score of 60 or above, they are considered to have strengths in the area of social, emotional, their learning, their resiliency, their capacity. If they had a score between 41 and 59, they fall within the typical range, exactly where we expect a child to be. And if they fell with a score of 40 or below, that indicates to us that there needs to be instruction. And this is where that Aperture suite and those resources are able to provide us. So I just want to share overall where we are in our schools. So we start at Morris Pond. These are our students in grades 5 to 6. And if we take the combined score of our student body that falls with scored either a typical rating or a strength rating, we put those together. So we're looking at all the students typical to strengths, not in need of instruction. Across Morris Pond, our student body, 80% of our students fell within the typical or a strength score. Mullen Hall, 85% of our students were typical or showed strength. North Falmouth, 87%, T-Ticket, 76%, and at East Falmouth Elementary School, 85%. So I say that just to frame out that collectively as a student body in June, we had a very strong number of students falling within the typical and strength rating. Now, we had a population of students that need instruction and need additional support, and we knew that. We administered the DESA in June so that we could have a baseline. It could help us determine if there were students that may need some support from counseling support of our staff over the summer. And it also gives us a baseline data. So what we'll do is we will be providing the next benchmark testing or the first benchmark assessment for this school year in October. And that's when it's prescribed to be delivered. So that will help us to continue to move forward. So with that in mind, I would like to provide some feedback, which was asked at the last school committee about kind of where we are currently, where are our students currently, and what are the supports and services we have in place. So I'm very happy to share with you that I received some feedback from our absolutely amazing, very highly competent and dedicated counselors. And what they've reported is that from the beginning of the school year, they've seen strong resiliency and adaptation skills among students and staff. They've seen a decrease in the social anxiety from the first full week of school to where we are today, and that students are happy to be back in school with peers and being able to work together in groups, be able to have more normalcy at lunch, recess across the grade levels. So while there's still much to celebrate in this front, we are still seeing students that are struggling and having more of a difficult time. Some of those some of those difficulties that they're reporting are students that are just having a more challenging time adjusting to school schedules, proper sleep patterns, and peer relationships compared to the start of school in other years. They're also reporting that students are presenting with a decrease in their social conflict problem solving and resolution skills. And that is really kind of based off of the lack of practice that they had because of the school year that we did have last year. And so with that, they're seeing that there's more of a need for tier 2 intervention, and that's short-term skill teaching interventions that are not long period of time. It's not for intense any social emotional instruction, but it's really more tiered to, like we talk about what Sonia and her team just shared about with across general education curriculum. We have that continuum of tiered support, and that's really more for some of our more dysregulated students. And then it's also important to note that this year we've seen an increase in, for a much smaller population of our student body, but we have seen an increase in crisis intervention, and some of that did require hospitalization for this time of year. Typically, we see it happening a little bit further into the school year, but we have noticed there's been an increase for the start of the school year. In addition to that, some of our counselors and what we're seeing collectively is just as a school community is that we have seen an increase in food insecurity and homelessness across some of our student body. So as you're aware, we're continuing with providing the breakfast and lunch for all students. We're maintaining our partnership with Cape Kid Meals, as well as the Falmouth Service Center and the Falmouth Human Services to make sure that we're addressing those needs as well. So now that you have an overview of kind of where we're at based off of June to here, some of the ways that we're addressing it is we've talked about, that we have our partnership with McLean Hospital. We are maintaining that this year. McLean is offering, we'll be doing 4 staff PDs this year. We've shifted our model a bit. One of those PD sessions will be for all of our district-wide staff. The other 3 are going to really target in our counseling staff, our therapeutic clinical staff that we have in the buildings. We're also going to be offering, McLean is going to be offering 4 parent workshops in the areas of how to address anxiety and depression, distress tolerance, some real relational foundations for parents, and building resiliency, because we want to ensure that we have not only the ability to address these supports and services and these needs in the school, but that we want to have parents to have the ability to have some of these tools in their toolbox, so that we have a continuum and carryover between home and school. We were fortunate today was a PD day, half-day PD day. Our high school staff was all in the NEASC PD, but we had McLean presented to our therapeutic staff, our clinic, our counselors in grades kindergarten through grades 8, and it was very well received from the feedback that I have gotten thus far. McLean is also working with us. We're developing a more therapeutic milieu presentation of a social emotional curriculum designed to support our students in the Connect and Bridge programs. We'll continue with our case consult at the building levels. And another thing that we've put in, which we've done this in the past, but it's much more targeted based off of knowing that we have a priority of addressing the social and emotional learning of all of our students this year as a quarterly meeting with administrative meeting, so that we can continue to tweak and recalibrate the services that McLean are providing to us as we go along based off of where we see our needs. In addition to that, we've signed an MOA with Gosnell. We're going to continue to have the Gosnell counselors be able to provide some of the wraparound services that go, and to support the counseling service that our district-wide school adjustment counselors have, the work that our guidance counselors do, and the support of our school adjustment counselors. As Dr. Dewar was mentioning about Calmer Choice and having folks back in, we're really happy that we can have our Gosnell counselors back in the building versus just being a telehealth service as we were necessitated to do last year. And then just, again, in addition to all of the supports and services that typically happen from our counseling staff to meet the social emotional, the tier 3 and or very specific driven goals and objectives through students that may identify with a social emotional disability that require services through an IEP. So these are some of the additional resources we have. And as Dr. Dewar had mentioned, we're providing the Calmer Choice again this year at our elementary schools. We're going to be very targeted in grades 3 and 4 from September through January, and first and second grades from January to June. Those are classroom sessions. They're 8 weeks. They're 2 times a week. They run for about 20 minutes. And then in addition, what we want to ensure is not only addressing the needs of the students, but also for the staff and of the staff is Calmer Choice will be offering, we've done this in the past, but they'll be offering 8-week adult self-care sessions. And one of those will be an in-person session and one will be a virtual session to ensure that we're offering a variety of options that work best for our staff. So collectively across the district, we're committed to providing the supports and services to meet the continuum of the needs of our students. We're extremely fortunate to have the dedicated professionals both in the district and our community partners to address the social and emotional learning and curriculum needs of our students across here in Falmouth Public Schools. So thank you for allowing me to give you that update of kind of where we are as of today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Joan? Leah?
I think that it was mentioned that maybe responsive classroom was being brought in. Is that right? I'm just thinking about tier 1. So we have Calmer Choice. Is there also a focus on responsive classroom?
Sure. So thanks so much. There is that's one of the components of the morning meetings. So at the elementary level, they are doing the morning meetings, and what's really nice is that with what the social emotional curriculum of the morning meetings and addressing that, the calmer choice, all of those pieces, it also really works into all the work that we're going to be doing with our restorative practices as well. So it really does dovetail into all of that. So thank you for bringing that up, Leah. But yes, there will be the morning meetings at the elementary level.
Okay, because I think when you were talking about like what the counselors are seeing around the social interaction piece, I just thought that, that's a nice program to bring in for that.
Absolutely. And thank you for pointing out that that's tier 1, because I think it's really important for everyone to have a strong understanding that the social emotional curriculum is a tiered intervention. So it's a general education tier 1. We have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And so it is the collective responsibility of all of our school staff community to be building in the tiered lessons. And that's what that Aperture Suite has, the resources based on the skill, but also it's got video links, it's got mini lessons, it has all those resources. So regardless as to whether it's a tier 1, a tier 2, or tier 3 level intervention, there's resources for whoever will be providing that.
And I just have a follow-up with that, because I think, we're talking about it and we know what these things look like, but I think it'd be really helpful for the public to like get a little glimpse of what it looks like, maybe what a morning meeting looks like, or what a calmer choice exercise looks like, just so people see what is happening in the schools. So maybe in the future we could do something like that.
Certainly, thank you.
And Kelly. Joan, thank you so much. That was really, really informative. And it makes me feel so comforted to know that there's such a research-based way of identifying kids who need those additional supports, that we're not, especially after last year where you might not have been face-to-face with a kid. It makes it so much harder. So I have two quick questions. One, so I forgot what it is, the screener that's being done in October. So that will be also for the high school now, because we have this expanded.
Correct. So that wasn't even available. That was never available actually until this school year. The difference between the DESE mini screener and full assessment kindergarten through grade 8 is that an adult administers is the one that's filling that out. Whereas now the high school edition, it's a self-assessment. So the students themselves fill that out. They're the ones that will answer those questions on behalf of themselves. And that's new. That's brand new for this school year.
I think it's great that we are able to do it so early in the year this year and have the whole year for trying to meet the needs that are identified. So then my second question is about whether or not we're going to do, or maybe that screener includes the items that are in the youth behavioral risk behavioral, I don't know what it's actually called, but I think you probably know what I mean, that assesses risky behavior and drug and alcohol use, because we don't want to, I'm wondering if we're planning on doing that this year to have an idea of whether or not that is an entirely different need that we need to be looking at meeting.
So I'm not sure if I'm answering this to the greatest extent that you're asking the question, Kelly, and if not, I'm happy to follow up and have more. But the mini screener has 8 questions, so it taps very much into a very more broad overview. When students that need instruction based off of the mini screener, if we're finding that there's students in need of instruction, we can then administer the full screener, which is much more in depth for the individual students that we've identified, but also as part of the kind of more of those risky behaviors and some of the substance abuse and all that, we have in more of the from Lawrence to the high school in that area, there's also the CBERT, which is the substance abuse, and that's a different screener that we use that taps very much more into those higher risks. So they're connected, but they're designed differently. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I was wondering whether or not we were going to do an assessment or a screener for those risky behaviors in addition to the related social and emotional pieces, because we know that those are all intertwined.
Yes, we will. Yes, so we'll be doing the DESA and we'll be doing the CBERT.
Great, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Any other questions for Joan? Great, thank you so much. I appreciate the update, Joan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Dorr.
Yeah, so I have 3 updates that I'm gonna share tonight. The first is timely with the NEASC decennial visit. So the NEASC is the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. It's the accreditation process for our high schools. We had our last assessment in 2010. So we're right on schedule for about 10 years later. And that's coming up next week, Sunday through Wednesday of next week. In April of 2019, the collaborative conference visit, which happens prior to the 10-year visit, they spent time at the high school and there were priority areas of growth identified. And the 5 areas were revise and refine the Falmouth High School vision of a graduate, complete UBD units for all courses, identify and address gaps in student learning, in particular with subgroups through intervention and programming, continue implementation of ALICE protocols for lockdown emergencies, and ensure that instructional practices within all classrooms are designed to meet the learning needs of each student, including differentiation, grouping, and tiered intervention strategies. During the visit, there were 2 of the 6 foundation elements that we found were in need, and that was the school has a written document describing its core values, beliefs about learning, and the vision of the graduate. And just to note, since that time in 2019, we have now completed a solid vision of the graduate, which here in Falmouth we're calling charting the course to graduation. And the second area identified was there's a written curriculum in a consistent format of all the courses and all departments. And we are now have all the UBD plans for all courses. So those 2 were completed. The Falmouth High School has now completed a school summary report that reviews all the priority areas for the visit next year or next week. We are confident that we will be fully accredited after this review. I'd just like to say, many thanks to Principal Gans and to the entire faculty and staff for all the hard work and dedication that's been required over the past 2 years to prepare for the NEASC review for next week.
Any questions related to the assessment or review of Falmouth High School? Thank you. Next item.
So I'd like to do a brief COVID update. This week, Commissioner Riley stated that he has extended the mask requirement through at least November 1. We will, that'll be revisited again at the sometime during October, but right now it is stated for November 1. Also, he extended the demonstration of vaccination rate of 80% or more until October 15th. So originally it would be this Friday that we would have to demonstrate vaccination rates. It's been extended to October 15th. They do have a process for reporting to the state now. And Commissioner Riley just stated that whether or not a school or district avails themselves of the 80% vaccination off-ramp, it is a local decision to be made by the school and the district leaders in consultation with our local health officials. So I wanted to give you an update right now of where we stand in our 2 schools that could possibly be available at Lawrence and the Falmouth High School. So right now, overall at Lawrence, we have a 60% fully vaccinated percentage. And at the high school, we are at 68%. We still have students that have had one shot and a few staff that has one shot. And so to be fully vaccinated and to be counted, they would still need their second shot on that. So there are still additional students that may still be having both shots, need one shot that could be calculated into that. And we have a couple more weeks now to demonstrate that if we so choose to participate in that 80%. I will add with the 80%, it's what it means is anybody that is vaccinated would no longer have to wear a mask in the school, but unvaccinated still would be wearing masks. So I'd just like to give a shout out for our amazing nursing staff since school started. It's been a lot of work with the new Test and Stay program. It's a lot to implement, and our nurses have been a huge support. And so I just want to say that, and I appreciate all the patience and kindness that so many of our families have shown our principals and our nursing staff as we've been implementing the new program. And I just ask for everyone to be patient, and we'll get to your questions and support you in any way we can. We have added some additional staff. Asia Gonzalez is an additional day COVID nurse, and we've hired Paul Dart as an evening and weekend COVID nurse to be able to answer questions. And when we get reports of positive cases, determine, work with the principals to determine if they've been in school, if contact tracing is necessary, to find out if they've been vaccinated, if they have consent for test and stay, or if the families are choosing quarantine. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hours with each case. And so we're happy that we're able to add 2 new staff members. Our public health nurse, Jen Reisfelder, has been our direct contact with CIC, the vendor that's providing the Test and Stay program. There has been glitches in the program since the beginning of school, and she has been working diligently with them to correct or fix or help get us to a point where it's working. It'll be a huge help to our nurses and our contact tracers when that's working well, because that's where all the data lives of those that have the consent for the Test and Stay program. She's also been working to collect all the data on the vaccinations and get it put together so that we can have our percentages. So she's staying on top of the students, and that's been an incredible amount of work as well. So she's focused in those 2 targeted areas so that we can make things a little bit easier across the board for all of our schools. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. With that piece, yep.
Okay, so questions for related to COVID? Yes, Carrie. So do we have, is this like 100% recording of the facts for the Lawrence and the high school? I mean, do we still have some outstanding that might bring our percents up? Because as you mentioned, the nurses and the people involved, it's so consuming to load up this data. So are we like, are we behind in that so that these percents may go up?
Well, they can certainly go up. Certainly those that's had one shot, we would expect that they'll have a second shot. And that would certainly, we are up to date on all of the reported vaccinations at this time. But that doesn't mean that there are still not staff and students that haven't reported to us. We keep encouraging everyone to make sure that we have that information. So, and then, people could get vaccinated any day. And so that could be added in at any time as well.
Yeah.
Andrea.
Maria, it may still be early days with the Test and Stay, but like a general assessment, I presume this is keeping more of our students in school, and it's working to the extent that you had expected it to for that purpose.
Yes, so it's a lot of data to collect and be able to report out on each case. But I do have an example that I could share. So at Lawrence, we had in one case where we had a positive, there were 66 close contacts identified. 28 of those students were vaccinated. 37 participated in the test and stay. We had one family that chose to have their child quarantined instead. So that's been pretty typical. If the number of students that are quarantined are very small, and we have a lot of students in test and stay, but we also have an equally large number of students that are vaccinated. So we are keeping more kids in school.
And so in that case too, it sounded like, that sounds very interesting that that not only they're participating in the test and stay, but you're not finding additional positives that are sending more students home. They actually get to stay.
Yes, out of the hundreds of students that we have been testing each day, we have had just a handful that's tested positive. Most, after talking with families, they do not believe that they've actually resulted in transmission at school. So we feel like that our schools are very safe. We're not seeing transmission. And yes, it is very comforting that out of the hundreds of kids being tested, they're negative. It's a negative test.
That's right.
Yeah. So with the test and stay, so students can go to school, but can they do things on the weekends? What is the protocol for the weekend events for families or after school events?
Yeah, thank you for asking, because that did shift a little bit. So in the beginning, it was if you're in test and stay, you were just in test and stay as long as you were negative, you could pretty much move about. Desi came out with a clarification last week. So when you're in test and stay, the recommendation is that you can participate in all in school and all school related activities. However, the recommendation is that they quarantine or should be quarantining for any other type of activities. And I think the idea behind that is that schools are controlled environments. We're wearing masks, so any activities indoors, whether it's a sporting event like volleyball, we're wearing masks because we're indoors. And outdoors has been deemed safe all the way around, so we don't have to contact trace outdoors. And those participating in the sports outdoors are fine as long as they continue on the test and stay. So all of our students that are participating in any type of sports and on the weekends, we continue the test and stay over the weekend as well.
So just a clarification for that, if your child is in a sport that's not a Falmouth Public School sport, can they be attending those sports if they're in test and stay?
DESE has guidance says that they should be quarantined.
Okay, so they should, so only if it's a control, within the school, so only if it's a school sport.
School and school related activities.
Okay. Okay.
Other question that, not really a question as much as a comment. After we heard from Scott McGann, I was so hopeful about our vaccination rates because he was telling us, of all eligible people, 80% had been fully vaccinated in Falmouth. And so to see numbers in the 60s, it's just really discouraging. Our nurses I'm sure they would be, promoting vaccination and doing that work, but they're so busy testing all of these unvaccinated kids that they can't. So, I feel for them because, I got a call that my kid was a close contact, not a call, an email that said, you're good, they're vaccinated. And it would just I just am really feeling for them because they're testing so many kids. And if we could just get more kids vaccinated, it would make everything, not only will we have more kids in school and not having to quarantine, but it would make the nurse's job and the teacher's job just so much easier. And I don't know what we can do we're offering the clinics. I mean, we can't really do much else, but it's just discouraging. It's just really discouraging.
Speaking of the clinics, Kelly, thank you for bringing that up. We had just a little over 22 students out of Lawrence and the high school that participated in the clinic this time. So it's a very small number compared to last spring, August. It's been dwindling in the participation.
Yeah. Just a kind of a general question. I know you may not have the exact number. I think our last meeting, you had said maybe there had been 9 positives up until that point. Would you say that like we're still roughly in that area since our last meeting? That when you said kind of a handful, would that be a ballpark?
So the handful was around the test and stay. So we have the dashboard up and so we're doing it by weekly. I mean, each week, so by weeks. And I think the data reported was 6 for last week, which was down from the week before. So the total, Kelly, are you?
I'm pulling it up.
I don't know what the total over number is.
Yeah. I was curious to see kind of where it was trending. I know
it's trending down.
Not a long enough sample to call it a trend
exactly.
yet, but
well,
yeah.
With what we have, it's a trend down.
Yeah,
We're very happy.
We'll take what we get.
I will say that good news, we absolutely did no testing today at all, any of our schools. So everyone's been out of the test and stay program. We do have a small number of students that need to be tested tomorrow morning. But we're very, hopeful that, as Scott predicted, that we may get settled in and the numbers may start coming down. It's starting to show that.
Can I want to clarify. So it's just because the reporting is different now, and I don't know if this is the way that it was reported last year, but I know in the school district I work in, it's different. So every week it's the new cases for that week.
Yes.
So before, I'm not sure if it was here in Falmouth too, but before you would have still students that were positive that were out that might still be in your number, but this is just new cases.
New cases each week.
Yeah. Okay. So it might be that those 13 students from the prior week were still out.
Yes, that is possible. Yes. Yeah. So these are cases, not isolations.
Yes.
So, and with that, thank you for bringing that up, that DESE is reporting, when you see DESE's numbers, they're reporting all positive cases, whether they were in school where we needed to do contact tracing, or whether they were out of school, they hadn't been in, because maybe they were starting to have symptoms or whatever, were never in school and then, tested positive. So we have DESE's reporting both. I'm reporting the ones that are in school that requires us to do contact tracing in school.
Okay, so
you're kind of getting both numbers when you say that.
Right, and Kelly found the graph.
Yeah, thank you.
So on the 17th, we had 13 positive cases, and then it went down to 6 end of last week.
And tomorrow's your reporting day, right? Is that Wednesdays that are the
reporting day for DESE?
Yeah.
But we do our graphs on Fridays.
Oh.
For the week. I know so it just crosses over. It's we had that problem last year.
No teachers out.
Yeah, and no teachers.
Yeah.
Yay.
Well, we've only had one teacher out of the 3 weeks.
I know, but
Yes.
kids can't learn if teachers aren't there, so that's awesome.
Any other COVID related questions for Lori? Do you have any other items in your update?
Yes, I have one more. I'm really excited about being able to share that the Wampanoag Nation singers and dancers are going to help us celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. And they will be at all of our schools. Their performances are Eastern social songs. They wear their dress they dress in traditional clothing, and their songs are accompanied by the water drum and the handcrafted rattles. So we're very excited. They'll be at every school. Some schools will have multiple performances at Morse Pond, Lawrence, and the high school. And they will begin next Monday, and it runs through the 13th. So very excited to be able to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day with our Wampanoag tribal friends.
Thank you. Andrea.
Laura, that sounds so great. They just had some performances at Highfield Hall that I was able to attend. And those dances, I mean, they get everybody up doing it, and it was so much fun. And I just know our students and staff are going to love it. And maybe in conjunction with that, we were just wondering if there would be a way to get the land acknowledgement somewhere on our website.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And maybe
Yeah, I can do that. And I will send a schedule out to you in case you would like to visit any of the schools. You have an opportunity so that you could also join in to watch the singers and dancers.
Thanks.
And I should just add, it's going to be, they're going to do a little bit of history. So it looks like, I mean, they're going to do 20 to 30 minutes of history. They'll do 10 minutes of question and answers, and then they'll have 30, 35 minutes of the dance. So they'll also be learning a little bit about the history at the same time. But I will make sure you have the schedule. So if you'd like to join.
Thank you very much. On that same theme, and actually, I was talking to Laura yesterday about this. I was talking to a person who's on the Nantucket Historical Society, and this led to that, and I was happy to send them a copy of our land acknowledgement. And I sent them the Google Docs where we had who we had researched, and they were very excited about it. So it's already remaining a living document. You know,
Wonderful. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Very good. So moving on to routine business to approve the minutes of September 14th, 2021. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Melissa, and then Bill Berger. Any edits to the meeting minutes? Seeing none?
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead. No. Are you sure? Okay.
After the minutes.
Okay, great. Okay, so all in favor of approving the meeting minutes from September 14th, 2021, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, passes unanimously. And yes, Dr. Dora.
I'm sorry, I did have one other update. Patrick just reminded me because he's going to provide it for us. I don't know if you want to do it now or after.
No, let's
you
do
get
it
through.
now. Yeah, let's go. Hi, Patrick.
So this is sort of last minute breaking news. Unfortunately, the school bus driver shortage that has been talked about in the news and at your previous meetings is hitting Falmouth, and we can't sort of Band-Aid it together anymore. So what that means is that we had to make this decision last week after conversations with our bus vendor, Lucini, and regional conversations through the collaborative and our other districts, just to confirm what was going on, is that we're in the process of redoing all the bus routes. This is something that our transportation director has never had to do a second time in a year. And we're going to be sharing a communication with families tomorrow with the updated bus routes. We have a communication plan that we're going to need to get out over the next few days. The implementation of the bus routes, new routes, will happen next Wednesday. For a variety of reasons, that's probably the best timing for that. The bad news, good news side of this, some stops have changed for some students, not all students. Bus pickup or drop off times have changed slightly, some a little earlier, some a little later. Bus routes may be a bit longer for some students and a bit shorter for other students. Probably the most significant change for Falmouth is that Morse Pond and Lawrence students will ride the same buses. That's the best way we can get from 27, using 27 drivers on a daily basis, down to 22 drivers on a daily basis, which is what we are believing now we can sustain in terms of where we are with drivers. There is no easy way out of this in terms of a pipeline of hiring. We estimated after conversations with the Cape Cod Collaborative is that there could be at least 40 school bus driver positions could be hired immediately across the Cape if those people were available. So, we're not begging or borrowing from other districts to solve this need. But the good news is that Falmouth has always provided bus services in a more generous way than the state requires. So students that want and need to ride the bus a bus will be available for them. So that's the good news. There'll be sort of little bits of changes for a multitude of people, but there will not be any severe hardships for some students that technically the district would not have to provide bus service to. The communication will go out beginning tomorrow. We'll follow up in written format on the website. We'll follow up with phone calls. We'll ask the principals to remind through their communications, remind folks to take a look at the new bus routes, and then we'll do some more reminders next week also, before Wednesday is the start of it. So unfortunately, we couldn't avoid what's going on. It's statewide. We haven't had to call in the National Guard or request that, and that's not going to happen in Falmouth. But we will have to make some changes.
And in addition to the modes of communication, we also have on Facebook. So another way to make sure.
We're gonna have the link up. to that,
Perfect,
yeah.
thank you. Any questions for Patrick? Okay, wow. Well, definitely a tough situation, but I know we are not the only ones facing this shortage. So thank you for that update.
Thanks.
Okay, we approved the minutes. Committee member reports. Any reports? Very good. Request for additional information. Did you? Yes.
Well, I had brought up looking at our data remote versus in person, and I don't know if there's any way to do that, but I would be very curious and just looking, because I know we did explore a remote academy, and just, I don't know, I just feel like that information would be helpful in seeing how remote students did.
In terms of testing and.
Yeah, in terms of, their progress monitoring for.
They did it.
They did it.
Probably could. I'm not sure what the capacity is to do it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, and I do think it would be helpful just to get a sense of what that's like, where we had such a year where we had two different learning styles going on.
Any other requests for information? Nothing. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second? Okay, you guys do want to stay? All in favor?
Usually everyone.
Aye. Okay, have a great night, unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Take care.